stories are so important, because if we talk about, especially for folks who don't have a lot of connection with, or not real close to LGBT people. Okay, so if they can think about real people and not the theoretical same-sex couple, then it makes it much more powerful for them, and they're not going to want to take away people's rights. Okay, so give you an example, and feel free to use any of these stories if you don't have your own. But my best friends have been together 30 years. They're getting married in October, and we've been talking about their vows because I'm going to be involved in their ceremony. And when it's very, very poignant for me, because really they have lived those vows. They have, for better, for worse, rich or poor, and the like. They've raised their kids. They've nursed one of their moms, in her last days, in their home, so that she could die among her family. They, for years and years, host Thanksgiving because 3 generations, their parents, their siblings, and their nieces and nephews want to come there to celebrate that because there's a special family feeling that they created. And it is right to me that they have access to marriage because they have lived it. It is wrong to me if someone wants to take that away. They contribute to their communities. They help their neighbors. They pay their taxes. Why can they not get married? So having some story like that to launch where people can glom on and kind of really create a concrete picture is very helpful. You all have stories. You all can draw upon your stories. But try to talk about it that way instead of just with concepts. Another example, and this was out there for you to pick up, Mildred Loving. You all know Loving versus Virginia, the U.S. Supreme Court case that knocked down the miscegenation laws. So take a look at that. It's really beautiful. And Mildred Loving wrote it before she passed away. She wrote it last October, I think, 2007. And it's just incredibly moving and something that you might be able to use in that resonance between what happened historically and what this means for people and what's happening now is exactly the same. Okay, I do want to point out, these materials are for your use. They're great crib sheets. This one, this little it's a message map. It's a little graphic. It has a lot of these ideas on here, so you don't have to keep trying to think about what happened here today. Same with this one, lays out some of the key messages. It starts with eliminating fundamental rights is wrong. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of this is right here for when you're ready to draw upon it. I do want to talk about that one that I just mentioned, regardless of how you feel. This is a good one to use when you're with a group of people who may not, again, have a lot of fluency with LGBT issues, and they may not really know how they feel about the issue. But if you start it that way, regardless of how you feel about the issue, Californians don't believe in taking away the rights from another group. Californians believe that our law should apply the same to everybody. And that is a really powerful message. There's also kind of a libertarian message, which is really about the government shouldn't be involved in this. When couples have been together for a long time, they know what they want. They know that without the government getting in there and deciding what their relationship should be about. So another good one to know about. Finally, what about just LGBT people are in every corner of our community? Yes?
Just real quick, the last argument about government not getting involved, does that lead you into a discussion of, well, the government already did? I mean, I just feel like that's, on one side we're trying to protect the judges as a branch of government that is, necessary, and without it, leads to consequences. I think that opens up that argument for an attack if you're then trying to criticize. I mean, obviously, I'm criticizing the voting system in this scenario, but if you're then trying to criticize that process as a fundamental part of government, it calls into question government in general. I think that might be one that you should probably steer clear of.
I agree. There is a little bit of friction between, if you put those two together, and this is again back to the know your audience point. But if there's an audience in which that's going to resonate, and that is apparently a really good one. And that one didn't really ring true with me for the exact same reason that you're raising.
should not be in the business of deciding who gets married or doesn't get married. It's that kind of thing. And that which kind of avoids that issue by saying the government should issue marriage licenses with complete neutrality as to the sexual orientation of the couple before it. So it's that angle. Who cares whether it's the courts? Who cares whether it's the legislature? Who cares whether it's the people? This is the thing. Everyone should be free to marry the person that they love, and the government should not be the gatekeeper of who gets a marriage license and who doesn't. So it's that slice. It's the Goldwater Republican. Remember those people? They're almost all dead now. It's that slice of, good old Republican libertarian values.
And also, people do not necessarily associate the court, make equal the courts and government. They don't necessarily see the courts as government.
Right.
So we've asked people not to use the language of the courts because no matter how people are inclined to vote on this, even if they're inclined to vote no, they still don't like what the courts did, so we don't say the courts.
Right.
But they have a different reaction to the word government.
Okay.
And words are really important in this, and I think, Donna can't emphasize enough that next to the presidential race, this is probably the race nationally that we most watch. So words really matter. When people talk about the polling has been done by professionals who are very smart, and literally every word that's on that page in front of you has been tested, and it's actually the words that move people who are in the place who are going to actually decide this election.
Okay.
It's freaky.
I realize that the concept of equal protections came after the Civil War, but was there ever a vote in California to update our Constitution to add that language to?
Equal protection has been part of the California Constitution, I think, from its founding. It started like 1849, or the recent iteration is 1879, and that's always been very firmly in there. I don't know if how it measures up to when it got into the federal Constitution. Yeah.
I know you mentioned the ABCs and Rs,
Yeah.
but have you seen, or I expect to see, the really inflammatory stuff as the date approaches, like the, plural marriages, or marrying a tree, or marrying a sister, etc. Are there, and obviously we're not going to convince those people, but if we're in a debate type scenario, what's the best response to those sort of, and I know that the Supreme Court really outlines great responses, but I wondered if there was something else that been tested.
Well, I think the oral argument was a perfect example, and this stuff happens all the time. There's almost never a time, especially if I'm talking to, a group of mostly non-gay folks who are sort of in the undecided, you will inevitably get the question, well, what about polygamy? And it's not so much, the tree or the dog. Inanimate objects, animals, not so much for folks. That's when you've got somebody who you're never going to convince, who's actually throwing that scenario. But people legitimately will say, well, what I've heard, what's to say that, people can't, marry 3 people then? And I think the best answer, it's like anytime sort of the Bible, Leviticus, blah, blah, blah says, unless you are an expert on the history of polygamy and court rulings and how the separation's been made, don't even go there. If you're a Bible expert, sure, take them on with, verse for verse in Leviticus. The best response, I think, to the polygamy argument is that is a red herring. That is not what we are talking about. And anytime we talk about same-sex couples should have the fundamental right to marry the person that they love, rather than engaging on that question, if the issue is, well, wait a minute, what about marrying 3 people? You immediately bring it back and say, that's not what we were talking about. That's not what the court held. That is not the issue being pressed. Talk to me about why we would eliminate the right of same-sex couples to marry the person that they love. So, you can decide if you want to say more. If you want to say more, I think you can say, look, there are very good public policy reasons why the government would not sanction